When I was shooting with the 10-bit 4K functions, it was just absolutely pristine. That was the sort of the specific setting on the camera that I was most impressed with.
Hi, I'm Johnny from CineD and I'm here with Ben Sherlock. Ben, how are you?
Hey Johnny, yeah, it's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
Lately, you captured some magnificent footage at your backyard, and I wanted to hear a little bit more how you did it. But before diving into it, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm a director of photography and I work across a sort of broad spectrum of projects, but primarily I focus on documentaries in the sort of adventure and travel landscape. But at the moment, I've been spending a lot more time at home and a lot more time in my garden, which really has kind of opened up this whole world to me that I have completely bypassed the whole time I've lived here, which is the world beneath our feet and that of insects.
So before we go any further, let's take those 2.5 minutes to watch this short example of macro filming that you did in the back of your garden.
All good.
Ben, so when you went into filming this project, what camera did you choose?
So the camera I chose to use for this was the Panasonic S1H. Panasonic very, very kindly gave it to me for a few months to sort of, run it through some tests, and that's what I did.
What lens did you choose for this project?
I wanted to shoot the whole piece macro for obvious reasons, and I really didn't feel like I'd ever shot sort of insects properly with my Laowa 24mm macro probe before. So that was what I decided to do. I decided just to sort of focus in on just using that one lens. So I knew that that challenge that you have with this particular lens, with it starting at f14, would create some problems for me. And that's kind of where the decision to use the Panasonic S1H came in as well, because I've got a lens that's really not very light sensitive, but I've got a camera body that can combat that problem.
So obviously you had to go quite high with your ISO settings. You remember on which ISO you shot?
Yeah, I mean, I shot in a variety of ISOs depending on if I was using the slow motion functions of the camera, but I'd say I probably got up to 3, 4, even sort of 5,000 ISO on the camera, which is pretty high. On most cameras, if I was going that high, I'd be very, very concerned about getting a lot of noise.
And was the image still clean on those high ISOs?
I have sort of pretty mixed sort of results with it. When I was shooting with the 10-bit 4K functions, it was just absolutely pristine. 25 frames per second, 4K 10-bit, it was beautiful. That was the sort of the specific setting on the camera that I was most impressed with. But there was definitely moments when I wanted to go to a higher frame rate, and so I had to take it down to 8-bit. I don't think you normally notice a massive difference between 10 and 8-bit, but when I was taking the ISO high, there was definitely a notable difference in the noise that I was getting between the 10-bit and the 8-bits. It seemed to jump up quite a lot.
Interesting. So not only that you needed to go high with your ISO settings, but also you shot some slow motion shots, which means you have to double your shutter speed and then also, of course, even go higher with the ISO settings. How did you cope with this?
Yeah, again, that's all part of the challenge that was wrapped up in. Luckily, I was filming in sort of some beautiful British summertime days, so there was a little bit of extra sunshine to sort of help things along. But doubling the shutter speed, having a very, very slow lens, all those things meant that I had to take the ISO very, very high. That meant that I think I probably used slow motion less than I probably would have, particularly when I was going sort of deep into the undergrowth, taking things like caterpillars or very, very small ants or bugs that were sort of buried beneath.
Did you shoot in Vlog and color corrected later, or you kind of shot everything out of the box?
Yeah, my color correction skills are notably fairly lacking. So I decided to sort of try and shoot this in the D-Cine-like setting. A setting that I found gave me the best chance of getting relatively decent colors in post-production.
So what we see is actually what we get. In other words, that's what you shot with and you hardly color corrected it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there was a bit of sort of pushing of the blacks and a little bit of extra contrast and a sort of touch of extra saturation, and occasionally a very, very slight tweak on the white balance.
There are a lot of movement shots within the film. How did you do this? Did you use a slider or it's all handheld?
So I used my Syrup Genie, the Linear 2 slider with the motorized head. That's what I used to get the vast majority of the moving shots. However, there were occasions when I was just starting to feel really restricted by it. Trying to sort of track and keep up with these insects while you're having to get your slider in position, adjust the feet, adjust the head. By the time you've got all those things done, occasionally I was just feeling like I was just missing the moment. So I decided to sort of trust the camera body and go handheld. But because you've got some inbuilt stabilization in the camera, I was finding the results were pretty astounding. So, when I was following bees, for instance, that was a really tricky thing to film with a tripod or a slider. So that's where the inbuilt stabilization on this camera was just absolutely invaluable.
And did you shoot like framing wise, almost like you wanted, or you kept the frame a little bit more open and then later in post you were able to crop to the image you want?
So again, I think that 4K functionality on this camera really comes into its own when you're dealing with things like insects, because they are fairly hard to predict, particularly if you haven't filmed them a lot. So going into 4K, just sort of easing the frame out a little bit and giving yourself a little bit of room to breathe made the world of difference. And it just gave me the opportunity to let things glide through my frame, not touch it too much, and just let them do their thing. And then in post-production, if I wanted to crop it in slightly, then I could do that. And also, if there was a little bit of shake, particularly with some of those handheld moments, then I could take that shake out in post-production because I was delivering in a HD timeline.
How did you deal with focusing? There are at least one shot which I really, really love. This is when the spider goes from out of focus into complete focus. I love this shot. All in all, when you talk about following the insects, sometimes maybe it's a bit too late, no? Like until they come into the frame and then you have to refocus and then they're already out.
Yeah, the spider was great. He was definitely keen to be on camera. First time I sort of sat my tripod down low and spotted him, I was like, oh great, perfect position. The sun was coming in at the right angle. And I moved my lens as close as I dared and boom, he just disappeared out of frame. And I thought, I've blown it, I've missed the moment. And I was just about to move away when he just darted out and reappeared again. So I moved my tripod and lens just a fraction closer again, and he darted out again. But what I noticed was that every time he'd dart back in again, he would come to the exact same spot. I mean, he had a mark. It was like he was, he was an actor or an actress. He was perfectly on his mark. So I just simply crept a little closer as he darted back and then moved even closer still and then set my focus for the point where he would come back to. He was perfectly trained. So the shot you see is probably about 4 little creeps closer and the spider just fell straight onto its mark. It was perfect. Good timing.
Anything in particular that you really liked in the camera?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot about this camera that I really love. I think actually when I first held it, the size was a little bit daunting. Actually, I do quite enjoy that. It feels well made. The buttons are substantial. You know, the thing clicks into place. It's really, really nice. You know, you've got double SD slots in there. You've got a decent full-size HDMI port. Something I've been like craving for years is to stop having to deal with these tiny, you know, blasted micro and mini HDMI ports. Finally, we get a full-size one. It's brilliant news. Batteries are fairly decent size. I mean, the fact that you can even power it via USB-C is just absolutely brilliant for me. One of the reasons I love Panasonic in general, the reason I loved the GH5 when it first came out, was because of the way that it was built. It was fairly weather sealed, and I feel the same way with the S1H. It just feels like a camera that I can take somewhere that's tough and brutal, and I feel like I'll be able to rely on it. And that for me is worth everything.
Whom is this camera for, as far as you are concerned?
Who's this camera for? I mean, for me, I think it's definitely a camera that I want to have in my camera bag as a professional filmmaker. When I go out somewhere remote or tough, I used to always pack in the GH5. I wouldn't always take it out, but it was a camera that I knew that was there, and if things got really tough or really cold or really wet, whatever it was, and you could take that camera out and get the shots. Also time lapses, you know, the fact that we're not only getting very, very high quality video, the fact that we can output to a decent external recorder like a Ninja 5 and get even better sort of 10-bit images, that's such a joy. But at the same time, I think it's a fairly simple camera to use because it's got a bit of a return to the old form of having real buttons and actual sort of decent menu systems. It's relatively easy to use. So yeah, for me personally, I definitely hope to see this camera sitting in my camera bag in the future.
And back to this short documentary that you shot at your backyard. What did you learn from shooting macro and insects?
Yeah, I learned a lot while filming this little piece. I mean, first off, there's a huge amount beneath our feet that we don't even realise. We're crunching on hundreds of insects every few seconds and I'm totally unaware of it. So I'm definitely stepping a bit more lightly around my garden at the moment. That's the first thing. But also I feel like there are a lot of opportunities right now to go out and be creative. You don't need to have, you know, the world's biggest set or access to the entire planet to find and shoot something beautiful. You just got to look really, really closely at something and you'll find there is something really beautiful and worth filming within it.
Ben, thank you very much. Again, it's really a pleasure to talk to you. Always learn something new when talking to you. And yeah, I hope that we will have the chance to talk again soon.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you. Guys, thank you very much for watching. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.